Good evening, everyone. Are you ready for another dish? I have had a lot of fun making the two videos that we have so far. Tonight, I'm going to show you about quinoa. This very special food source. I just recently found out quinoa isn't a grain, it's considered a seed. And it's very, very beneficial and it's healthy. NASA actually has used this in their long-term space flights because of its properties. I used to have quinoa prepared from someone else and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was very curious about making it myself. So I tried many different times to make it in different ways, and I really never felt successful. I didn't enjoy the preparation outcome until recently. I found my successful way of making quinoa and making it taste good. So I will share that with you today. Before we talk about this recipe that I'm going to use today and the ingredients that it'll need, I'm going to discuss with you quickly how I prepare it, and it will require the use of a rice steamer or a rice cooker, as I call it. I have a rice cooker that this thing gets used all the time, and it's not even just for rice. I cook many different things inside my rice cooker, and it's wonderful. It comes out very successfully most of the time, and you don't have to tend to it while it's cooking, and it's very easy to clean up, and it doesn't take long. For instance, all those failed versions of quinoa that I have gone through previously were stovetop versions, cooked in a saucepan or different types of pans depending on the amount of quinoa. And I had a very difficult time controlling the temperature so the quinoa wouldn't burn or stick to the pot. Also, it never worked out the timing to match what the instructions would say. On quinoa, the instructions usually tell you it'll only take 20 to 25 minutes. On a stovetop, I have gone through periods where it'll take 45 minutes for it to actually cook to like a soft, tender stage, and still having issues with the texture. In the rice cooker, this takes 20 to 25 minutes, and it's perfect. And it's consistent every time. So that's what we're going to use for my version of quinoa. And you can apply that technique to many different recipes using quinoa, which I will share later on with you. So as you can see from the ingredients here, it's very simple. There aren't many things that you'll need. What we're going to make is a Mandarin Orange Basil Quinoa today. If you're not a fan of basil, you could use mint instead, or some other type of aromatic herb. This dish can also be used cold, like a salad or a small side dish, or it can be served warm with an entree or the entree itself. Really, any type of protein would, I think, go beautifully with this dish. We have first basil or mint or whatever aromatic herb you would like to use. We have some salt. You'll need some olive oil or butter or whatever kind of oil you might prefer, coconut oil. Some water, and here's my can of mandarin. This is a small can. The serving size of this would be for 2 people, 2 individual portions. If you wanted to make more, you could buy the larger can of mandarins. This size is an 8.25 ounce, so it's the small can of mandarins. And then your quinoa right here. And I have drained the mandarin juice into a bowl already because you'll need this first and you need them separate. We'll start by using the oil that you choose. I have olive oil, and I'm going to coat the bottom of my rice cooker pan. So it won't take a lot, just enough so it's not, the quinoa doesn't stick too much to the pan. Even though this is non-stick, it can still create like a crusty texture on the very bottom of the quinoa or rice. But the oil should help keep it a little more separated and tender. I'm going to actually use a napkin to spread it more evenly and maybe absorb excess oil. So I'm just spreading it in the pot. I have found the measurements for the quinoa and the ratio to liquid needed is double whatever amount of quinoa you are using, double the amount of liquid that you're using. For instance, I'll be using 2 serving size portions, which are a 1/4 cup per person. That's a 1/4 of a cup per person. Total of 1/2 cup. Wow. So what you want to start to do is put your liquid in the pan before the quinoa. And that means I'm going to be making a 1/2 cup of quinoa. That will mean I'll need a cup of liquid. I had drained the oranges, which created a 1/2 cup of juice, plus the oranges still have some liquid in there too. So I'm going to go ahead and pour the juice from the oranges, and then I'll need another 1/2 cup of liquid, which I'll be using just water. So I'll measure out, this is a 1/4 cup, I'll measure out 2 for a total of a 1/2 cup. Okay. And that's the liquid. Now we'll put the quinoa in, and I have a 1/2 cup measuring cup. I'll pour the quinoa. And I'll put it right in, just like that. I'll put a little shake of salt. Like that. I'll go ahead and dump the mandarin oranges inside. That easy. I'm gonna give it a little stir. I have my spoon. I'll scrape down the sides because the quinoa, it kind of reminds me of those tiny little styrofoam balls that the static electricity makes them stick to your skin, because they tend to go up your pan. So I'm just making sure that I scrape them down into the water. And then I'm going to put my lid back on. I have to plug it in. And I'm going to turn it on. 20 to 25 minutes from now, it will be ready. And I don't have to tend to it or worry that the temperature is going to be too high or too low. It will just do its thing and it'll come out delicious. There is not much to the recipe, but one other aspect that you can start on is the basil. I've already washed it, and I also have an orange that I'll be using. This is optional, but make sure you wash it if you do. What we will do with the basil is chiffonade, cut. So it's up to you how much or how little basil you would like to use, or whatever ingredient you might substitute, like the mint. I'll start with this little sprig of basil. I'm going to pull the leaves off. And I'm going to stack them in my hand. We'll start with, I have about 6 leaves. I have them stacked. They smell so good. Fresh herbs, especially after you wash them, oh my goodness, it smells divine. So I'm going to start by rolling the basil. I'll put it on the cutting board here. Rolling that stack tightly together. As you're rolling it, that's letting the aromatics out of the basil, and it is so important. It smells great. Then we're gonna make tiny little cuts, which is called a chiffonade cut. Not perfect, but I know what it's supposed to look like. There we go. So after you cut your basil, I'm going to put it in a little bowl. And I just can't get over the delicious smell. It's very pleasant, intoxicating. Now, if you choose to use an orange for the juice, you just cut off however much juice you want. I'll cut about 1/3 off of the end. And I'm going to pour, or squeeze, I'll say, the juice on top of the basil. And I'm getting it everywhere. Oh, it smells so good. So I'm just letting the basil and the orange blend together while the quinoa is cooking. And that's all there is to it. The next thing that I want to show you is how to make a pretty garnish. I have a little story, and it's about my brother Todd. He and I are closest in age. I have 3 older brothers, but Todd and I, when we were kids, spent more time together because of our age. And when we were little, we had an easy bake oven, which I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. It was a lot of fun to play with. You could also get burned very easily, but it was something that was entertaining and educational too. And sometimes when we would make things, Todd would make sure that he thought it was very important to save something from the ingredients for the end result. And he said it's very important to garnish it. So sometimes we, even later on, he and I both would together make a cheesecake, and he would take some of the graham cracker crumbs, and at the end he would say, now it's time to garnish, and he would sprinkle the graham cracker crumbs on top. I love garnishes. In this case, we're going to use an orange and the basil for the the basil we've already chiffonade. So the orange, what I'm going to show you is, if you can zoom in, David, is a pretty little garnish that will go on top of the main dish like that. And it's very simple. You just slice a very thin amount with a sharp knife of your orange. And then you make a cut, a small little cut on one end like that, and that allows you to twist the orange like that. So that will be our garnish if you have a bigger portion. If you're going to do an individual portion, you can just simply cut off a little triangular section, and that will be a pretty garnish for a single portion. I think it's almost ready. Our beautiful quinoa is all ready. This one is still hot and fresh out of the rice cooker. And you can serve it this way, or you can serve it at room temperature, or you can chill it and it's more like a cold salad. I think it's delicious any of those ways. It just depends on what your preference is. It also would depend on what you want it to be served as, a salad, a side dish, or a main entree. I'm going to set that down, and then we'll get our beautiful orange decor. Actually, I'm going to put the basil first that we soaked in the orange juice. I'm going to spread it around. And you can mix this together after you serve it if you like. You can just toss it, or you can do it before you serve it. And then we put our little decoration on top. And there you have Mandarin Basil Quinoa. Enjoy! I also took an individual sized portion and refrigerated it for a chilled salad. Let's see how it's going to look. So that's half of the total portion, and it's just enough for one person as a small side dish or salad. And remember, we cut that little small garnish. Here's some little basil and our little piece of orange. And there we go. Now it's time for the taste test. It's very refreshing. The citrus from the oranges and the aromatics from the basil are very, very pleasing. I hope you enjoy it. Now go try quinoa.